Hello everyone, welcome back. In the last video we talked about Terraform state. We saw how you can configure your state in a remote location and so that everybody in your team kind of work together. This video is gonna be about loops, conditionals, majorly about for and for each loops. We're gonna see with Terraform 0.12, Terraform kind of provides with a few of the primitives like count, for each, and for expressions to loop through a list of objects, maps, and sets as well. So yeah, let's get started. We're gonna start off with a count parameter, wherein we're gonna create bunch of DNS records and see how you can use count again to iterate through the list. So let's go ahead and try to create one DNS. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create an Azure DNS. So yep, that's what I'm gonna do. Let's look at the boilerplate code in the Terraform documentation. So what you do is you get started with the resource group. We already have got that resource group over here, so we're gonna reference that right below over here. So the syntax goes like resource and then type of the Azure RM underscore type of the resource, that's gonna be DNS zone, and then a local name, DNS zone, the mandatory parameters, which are name, resource group. So the name's gonna be defined right over here, resource group gonna be defined. We're gonna call the above resource group, so it's gonna be the API name dot resource group dot name. That's how we call a previously defined resource dot name. Yep, that's be all. We're gonna define a count function over here. Count, we're gonna use it, don't worry about it. So count's gonna be var dot DNS name, and the name's gonna be var dot DNS name, and we're gonna iterate through this using count dot index. Let's define our count variable right over here. Index variable right over here. The index variable goes like variable and then the DNS name, it's gonna be a list, so I'm gonna define the list over here, and we're gonna define the list right over here. So DNS name gonna be lists are defined inside square braces, so I'm gonna define the list inside the square. So it's gonna be a list of 4 Shan, let's give it name as shan.com, and there's another, let's give it inside this double quotes, another, so we're gonna create a 4 object list, shan2.com and then shan3.com. Yep, our list is ready. Let's go back to our main. Yeah, so if you notice, we have used count. So count's gonna be the number of objects we want to create, number of DNS zones we want to create equals to count. Remember, we used count above. That's a static count. However, if you want to loop through certain objects in a list, we're going to use count. However, we're going to use a function called Terraform. Also comes with functions like any other programming language. So we're going to do a length of var.dns name. var.dns name is simply a list of 4 objects, 4 values, that is shan123.com. So what it's going to do is it's going to simply iterate through all. It's going to count the length of all those var.dns, which is 4. The length of the list is 4, and in the name section what we have done is we've simply iterated the name it's going to create is var.dns name 1, which is shan.com, var.dns name 2, shan2.com, and likewise for the other resources also. Terraform also comes with a for loop, wherein you can iterate through certain lists. So to iterate through certain lists, you can do is the syntax goes like for and then the list, and that's simply then the value. So what you can do is for list, the syntax goes like the value and then the list item. That's how it is easy to create a for loop. So let's take an example how you can probably iterate through certain objects. So we're going to apply a for loop into an output and see how you can probably use for loop as well. So I want the output of the DNS zone. Let's probably look at the attribute parameters, what all parameters give. So gives us ID. So for loop in Terraform is pretty similar to any other language. So we want the value. Value is gonna be for, remember, item in list and then the output. So we're gonna construct this. We're gonna construct this like for I in var dot DNS name. That's what we define in our variable. Yes, for item in DNS name brackets colon and then the output. I want the values into capital letters, so it's gonna be upper function and then I. You can simply put I as well. Even if you put like this, it's gonna give you all the values of var.dns name. So I'm gonna put an upper function, put I inside it, and yeah, that's pretty much all. That's how you define a for loop in the Terraform as well, just like any other programming language. So let's go ahead and try to run this. Yep, looks okay. So I'm gonna open my terminal. Terraform init, do a Terraform validate as well. Looks okay. Do a Terraform plan. Cool. Let's do a Terraform apply with an auto approve flag and wait for the resource to get applied. Alright, the resources are being created now. You can see that we've given the output with all the output is in capital letters. That's what we defined in our output, and we kind of used a for loop which iterated through our var.dns name, which was defined right over here. So yeah, that's easy how it is to use a for loop, which expression which iterates over each element in var.dns name, and then evaluated the expression in the upper format with an I as an item, each set to each respective element. The type of bracket we used over here was a square bracket, which produces a tuple. If a curly brace is supposed to be used instead, the result would have been an object, and the result expression must be provided in a symbol like this. If you want to use square braces to get the list of curly braces to get the list of objects, you need to use like I and then probably like this upper S, upper I, and then the square braces. Yep, that's pretty much all. So yeah, so I'm gonna undo it and get it to the previous state. That's how you define a for loop into a block and iterate through your variable. Terraform also comes with dynamic block for each loop for a more complex scenario. So dynamic blocks acts like more a for expression but produces nested objects, nested blocks instead of a complex typed values. So if you got a complex values inside your block which needs to iterate over a given complex value and generate a nested block for each element of that complex value, you can use for each element for those structure value. So let's probably look how you can use for each loop and where you should be using it. For each value must be a map or a set with one element per desired nested block. If you need to declare resource instance based on a nested data structure combination element from multiple data structure, you can use Terraform expressions functions to derive the values. Let's go ahead and get started and see how you can use for each loop. Let's go back to our documentation. So I have my, so let's suppose you've got this block. I'm going to take an example of Azure, a network resource security group. So let's say you've got the security group right over here, and inside that you see a nested block as well. So within a block you've got a block. Let's suppose you want to create multiple resource group, and this is in a kind of a map. You've got a key and your value. So how you can probably can you think of a for loop over here? It's going to be a little difficult because in previous example for loop was kind of in list, and this is a more complex kind of a nested block where you wanna loop through. So in these scenarios you can always use the for loop. So if I go to the documentation, this is how the for each loops kind of works inside a nested block. So we're gonna do the same. Let's go back to our documentation and create a network security group. We're gonna define it right over here. I'm going to minimize the terminal. Alright, so it's gonna be a resource and then the security network security group, which is like Azure RM underscore the type of the source network underscore security underscore group, and then the name, local name, NSG rule, the mandatory parameters which are like name, resource group, location. So name's gonna be Azure network security group rules inside the braces. Then the resource group, which is like API name dot resource group dot name. So that's gonna be Azure RM resource group dot its name, and then the location, which is gonna be again pretty much same, RM resource group dot location. Alright, let's get the fun part. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna define my variables right over here. The variable gonna be, let's give it a name as probably network rule, and define the variable right over here. Network rule equals to square braces. It's going to be a square braces inside, since this is kind of there's going to be multiple list with a map in it. So there's going to be one map and comma, and the second rule, and then the third rule if you have any. So that's how you define your block over here. The square braces for the list, because if you notice, inside a square braces there's this one block inside, and there's this. Let's get started with square curly braces. There's one block over here, the first block, and the second block. It kind of becomes like a list, and inside the curly braces you define all your maps, just like we defined over here. So let's go to our documentation. Let's pick up this particular bar and define right over here. That's gonna be our first set of variables. It's gonna be the second set, and then we have defined this third set right over here. Let's change the value to make it real. 1 to 3 looks okay. The priority is going to be 100. The source port is going to be 22. Name is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. Priority is going to be 101. It's going to be 443. It's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Priority is going to be 102. Port is going to be 3389. Yeah. Alright, looks okay. Let's iterate through all of these using a for each loop. Go to our main block and let's see how you can define. To start with, if you look at the documentation, you start with a dynamic block that acts like much like an for expression but produces a nested block, and then the values, which is in our case gonna be the security group. So it's gonna be like dynamic and then the security rule. That's what we have defined in the documentation. And then it's gonna be a for each keyword, and we want to iterate through var.network. Let's check the variable name, network rule. So that's gonna be var.network rule. That's where it iterates through, and then the content block, a square braces, and all the values is gonna loop through. So if you look at the documentation, content, curly braces, and all the variable, and then the value of the. You can use an iterator as well, like defined over here, or arguments which sets the name of a temporary variable. Let's see how we can use an iterator. So I'm going to use the iterator as rule. Consider this as an item which you used in the for loop, is equals to rule iterator. Let's look at the spelling, iterator. Alright, so that's rules gonna be the value. So remember, we use for I in item and then the value. So consider this I as a rule. Cool. So I'm gonna paste in all my variable, which is I'm gonna put it, pick up right from here, copy this and paste it right over here. Looks okay. And I'm gonna delete this. Shh. So I've got this deleted. Let's empty this as well. So what I'm gonna do is I have passed all the variables right over here, and I'm gonna iterate through all of them one by one. So it's gonna be the iterator, which is rule dot value. So these values gonna be static for all your. This is not a dynamic value, so it's gonna remain same across. And then the value variable name, which is over here name, and same goes for all of them. So if I simply do a control C, sorry. See. Psh. Hmm. The values rule.value for all of them so that it can iterate through each of them, and then priority, direction, access, protocol, source, destination, source address prefix, destination address prefix. Yep, that's pretty much all. So what we did, we defined the iterator over here for each loop, for each through the variable.network rule, which is defined right over here, and then the content that's used for the dynamic nested loops. And that's pretty much all. Let's get our terminal back again, do a Terraform format. Alright, looks like there's a site error in the line 42. It says alright, we've missed a brace, curly brace. Gonna give it right over here, do a Terraform format now, and a brace over here as well. Do a Terraform format. Probably, yep, the format has been done. Do a Terraform plan and see if the code we've written is looks okay or not. Or it looks like we have got a crash. That's pretty interesting. Let's try to fix this. Alright guys, so if you notice that we have got into a weird scenario wherein Terraform kind of crashing. Oh, it's so looks like the state has been gotten locked. So if you go to your state file and go to your resources, whenever you see such error, you can always force unlock your Terraform state. Terraform state has been locked at the moment. So if I go to my resource group and then go to the storage, if you go to the storage, and that's the container, if you click on this, if you see that there's been lease being created over here. So if I'm gonna break this lease and do a plan again, this time you see a Terraform crash. So if I try to debug this further and follow the documentation and pick the API name right from here, I think that's the root cause of the error. There's a slight typo right over here, so I'm gonna copy this, paste it right over here, and do a plan now, and let's see if it lets us create the resources. Or it looks like it is now. So these small typos can break your code, and kind of gonna Terraform might get into a panic mode. So yeah, make sure that you get your documentation bang on. So if you see now, the Terraform plan has been successfully picked up, and it is trying to create all those resources for us, security group rules, and it is iterating through all of the 3 security group rules we have. Now I'm going to do is Terraform apply, auto approve, and it's going to start applying the resources for us. You can see that it is going to start creating the resources for us. So yeah, Terraform. Yeah, over the last few minutes, we saw how you can use Terraform declarative language and could see that the resources are being created. And if you go back to your resource group, you would see that your resources has been created. Network security group is right over here, and our incoming rules should be right over here. Test 123, 134, and these are the three rules we created. Alright, that's pretty much all. Terraform is a declarative language, however, it includes a large number of tools such as variables and count, for each, which we discussed in this particular video. That gives a language a surprising amount of flexibility and expressive power. There are number of more tips and tricks which we're gonna cover over the next few videos. So stay tuned, we'll be back soon.